Well, if you're still watching, you haven't been put off woodwork for life, and I can almost guarantee that the next lap joint is going to be a lot easier.
So I'm only using about 4mm of the chisel width, not the whole width of the chisel. And I'm going to press with my thumb. You can see the blood leaving my fingernail. And I'm wiggling and pushing, and I'm getting a really fine shaving off. What I do then is to rest my chisel on the bit that I've already cut, and I just take off the next step. And you can tell that the chisel is deciding where the wood separates because the wood's curling, and it's actually separating the fibres and breaking the fibres to make the wood curl, as opposed to splitting the wood, which is what would happen if I tried to do this further down. The fibres would just separate where they wanted to. But here I'm controlling the process. That razor sharp edge is doing exactly what it's intended to do. Pressure on the thumb is quite important, and every time you've taken a cut, you then use that new surface to rest your chisel on to take the next step, and you gradually work your way across. So the most difficult part was that first bit, because I had nothing to refer to. The wood's behaving as it should do. It does depend on the grain, and the last time I did this, the grain was really tricky, and the fibres were splitting rather than being cut. And you go all the way across, and you've taken less than, I'd say about 0.2 of a millimetre, something like that, of material off. Nothing much more than that, maybe even less. So that's pairing. So we're going to take the material off in 3mm deep chunks, and I'm going to use about 10mm of the chisel edge now, and I'm just going to tap the end of the chisel handle with the heel of my other hand. Just use it as a mallet. Good. I can take another 3mm off. The narrower the piece you chip off, the less energy you need to put into splitting the fibres. So if you find that you're hurting the palm of your hand, just take narrower chunks off. Next one, I can just use the chisel as if I was pairing, but taking larger chunks off than that. Important that you control the tool. I'm getting a bit close to that line now to be comfortable bashing the chisel with the palm of my hand, or the heel of my hand I should say. Now if I show you that, you can see that it's parallel to the line. It's not particularly even. If anything, it's rising upwards, which is preferable on both sides. It's the way the grain is going. You can actually see the line of the grain there. So I'm not going to go below my line very easily, but I have probably got to take more off the back edge of that than I have done. So let's do that first. One thing I mustn't do is go below that line. Ideally, and I don't know whether I'll achieve it, what we're looking for is half that groove that we put in with the marking gauge visible when I finish the joint. So when I put the chisel into that groove, half of it's remaining on the wood, half of it I take off, and we should be able to see evidence of that. I'm getting down to within about 0.5 millimetre of that line. That's what I'm aiming to do. I'll show you where we are. So we've got it even, on both sides. We're about 1 millimetre away from the edge. I'm going to even that is a little bit too much. I'm going to go down again, try and halve that. I'm actually there, if you have a look. Can you see? You can see the pencil line just on that edge. But what I've done is take it just off the edge, not further back, so I need to go further back with that cut. Rest it there, and then take that shaving off. And that's pretty much on the line. I can see the pencil there. Now we can go along and we can do, even though I didn't intend to, I've got a splinter. Even though I didn't intend to, I can start putting the chisel into that marking gauge line, which is what I'm doing now. If we have a look at that, you can see that I'm just on the line there, and at the side here similarly, but not here. I've got to go a bit further on that far side, and you can see that corresponds to that pencil being visible in that position. So I just take a little bit off that far side to get it back to the line. I've done, and now what I can do is to just even that out by putting my 2 fingers above the surface and just running my chisel across without lifting the handle, and that is pretty good. And let's have a look. Down to the line here, down to the line there, and you can just see that pencil line all the way along. And that, when it's cramped up, is going to be pretty good. Good, so I've got 2 joints done now. Let's do the remaining 2. Do you remember I said that the distance between here and here was longer than from here to here? And if I measure it, I can show you the difference. So that's 27, exactly as it should be. And this is 27.25, something like that. And I need to just remove about 1/4 millimetre from this edge. And this is how I do it. I take my marking knife and I place it where I want it to be, which is there, and I re-establish that line so that I've got a definite groove to put my chisel into. Having done that, make sure it's really firm in the vise, I don't want it slipping. And I can then use that assassin's dagger grip that we saw before, flat edge this side, scissors, paper and stone, push it round, thumb behind, and I can rest this part of my hand on the wood. I'm going to start this end because it's wider down this end. Now, if I'm careful, and I'm going to be very careful because I don't want to mess this up, I can line that up exactly with that mark, and I'm going to push with this thumb to stop it slipping towards me. I'm going to put my shoulder over the chisel and I'm going to rock it, making sure it's vertical until I've chopped a bit off. Then I'm going to use that as my reference to follow that line along. And I'm not using the whole chisel width, if you notice. I'm merely using about 10 millimeters. 10 millimeters at a time. And I've got enough strength to push that through the wood. And the pieces are getting thinner as I go down, but it's easy because I've already got that reference. I can just move it along the edge. This is split out a bit, so I'm going to be a bit careful there. Just take that last bit off, and that should have done the trick. Let's have a look. And that now is pretty flush with the other bit. And now they line up really well.
Well, that was better. And having got the 4 lap joints done, it's now time to turn our attention to the housing joints.